Round of applause. We are lucky to have him as our congressman, Congressman Greg Casar.
¿Qué pasó, San Antonio? ¿Qué pasó, San Antonio? Santi, thank you for the amazing chant. Vote, vote, vote. Vote, vote, vote. Vote, vote, vote. Vote, vote, vote. And Cristina, thank you for hiring me on as a baby organizer. I was barely of drinking age when we first took on some of the most powerful CEOs in this state. And if only they could see us now, bringing Bernie Sanders to San Antonio to flip Texas together. Let's hear it for Cristina. Y'all ready to flip Texas? Y'all ready to flip Texas? Y'all may not know it, but we are at such a significant moment in American history, not just as a country, not just as a state, but right here, right now, in the heart of San Antonio. Historians will write about what we chose as Texans in this election, because we are deciding between autocracy and democracy. There is a fork in the road, and Texas sits in the middle of it. This decision will have repercussions for generations to come. But I believe in us, San Antonio. Do you guys believe in us? The choices are stark. One fork in the road is down the road of oligarchy, where the Elon Musks of the world continue to amass absurd amounts of wealth. And they put that money into buying themselves power and lobbyists and getting tax cuts for themselves at the expense of everyone else and buying up social media. That's what they're doing right now. And they do that to spread lies. Y'all see it right now on your phones. Lies that all the problems with our country are the fault of immigrants or are the fault of trans people. We know those are lies, and they tell those lies because the people really screwing the American people over are Elon Musk and are Jeff Bezos and is Wall Street and are the right-wing politicians like Ted Cruz that do their bidding. Y'all ready to kick Ted Cruz back to Cancun? But I know we don't have to pick that fork in the road. We can go down a path being built every single day here in San Antonio by you all. That's why I love this city. Think about it. Think about it. We've been through so much together these last few years. Donald Trump trying to separate our families, trying to put our kids in cages. It was people here in San Antonio that built sanctuary, made sure that families weren't separated, made sure people had lawyers. It was just a few years ago that Governor Greg Abbott banned abortion in this state. But we didn't just give up. Y'all fought back. We fought back. We made sure that our friends' shifts were covered at work. We made sure people had the money to get out of state and get the abortion care they needed. People in San Antonio never give up. We never give up. And as inequality grows, and as these corporate stooges try to help the billionaire class, San Antonio is rebuilding a labor movement unlike we've seen in a century. Unlike we've seen in a century. Starbucks all over San Antonio unionizing. Amazon warehouse workers I've met up and down I-35 organizing. Teachers at SAISD saving their students, saving their schools. You see, that path towards oligarchy is being pushed on us from the top down. But here in San Antonio, we're fighting back from the bottom up. From the bottom up. So these two paths before us, it's gonna be Texans that decide. Texans that will choose between autocracy and democracy. Texans that will choose to build an economy for the working class versus the billionaire class. Texans that will tackle the climate crisis and create good green union jobs to save our planet and our democracy. It will be Texans who choose between electing a predator and a President Kamala Harris we can be proud of. Jalen asked me to say it again. We will choose between a liar and a leader. We will choose between a predator and a President Kamala Harris that we can be proud of. The choice runs directly through Texas. Control of the United States House. Control of the United States Senate. 40 electoral college votes on the line here in Texas. Not just determining a presidential election in November, but presidential elections for generations to come and Supreme Court appointments for generations to come, so we can have a court that protects our lives and our laws rather than taking our rights away. That's determined here in Texas by each and every one of you. So I know it's hard. I know the right wing is going crazy right now. They're trying to turn us against one another so we can never get this done. But here in San Antonio, I love this community because we care for one another. We don't fall for that. And we're gonna make sure that we get it done. Doesn't matter if it takes one election or two or three or four. The reason they make it hard is because, as Cristina said, when we flip this state, not just from red to blue, but from corporate sellout to for the working people, we transform not just this state, but this country for generations to come. That is in your hands. Do y'all believe it's in your hands? Can we do it? Y'all ready to fight? Y'all ready to win? Y'all ready to win? If we want to do it, we've got to believe in ourselves, and we've got to stop buying the lies that they tell about us as Texans and as San Antonio. Let's think about some of those lies. I'm sick and tired of hearing this one. I hear it all the time. People saying, no, San Antonio is a quiet corporate city. That's a lie. Let's set the record straight. San Antonio is a labor town. It's a working people town. This is where the Chicano movement was born. This is the beating heart of the civil rights movement in Texas. This is the home of Emma Tenayuca, a 21-year-old organizer who led 12,000 Mexican-American women on strike right here on this ground in downtown San Antonio and transformed the labor movement across the country, pushed FDR to be a pro-labor president. That came from this dirt. That came from these streets. That's the real Texas. That's who San Antonio is. That's who you all represent. We need a place where the people lead and the politicians follow, and y'all are the leaders here. That's who San Antonio is. And on this ballot, we can live up to that kind of tradition. You've got a chance to get rid of some of the worst of Greg Abbott's corporate stooges, some of whom represent San Antonio, and send to the State House people like Christian Carranza, a working class champion for the south side of San Antonio and for the east side of San Antonio. You can pass on your ballot getting rid of the gag order against our public employees and public unions. Give public unions the chance to mobilize the way they should. Pass Proposition D on your ballot. You can rebuild that labor movement here in San Antonio. Y'all ready to pass Prop D? Look for it on your ballot. And of course, while you're at it, we can swap out Ted Cruz and send Colin Allred to represent us in the United States Senate. How about that? That sounds pretty good. The other really big lie we hear all the time is that Texas is a red state, so your vote doesn't matter. That's got to be the biggest lie I ever heard. But the only way it works is if everybody buys into that lie. But not so long ago, Texas sent a president to the White House and organized and pushed him. His name was LBJ, and they sent to his desk the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, the creation of Medicaid, the creation of Medicare, Head Start. All of that was created by and for Texans. That's the real Texas. That's the real Texas. Let's look at the numbers. Not very long ago, President Obama lost to Mitt Romney in this state by 16 percentage points. 16. The next election, Hillary Clinton lost by not 16 in Texas, but 9, from 16 to 9. The next election, President Joe Biden brought it within 5 points. Within 5. The polls show that trend is continuing, but we are the polls. If we register, if we volunteer, if we knock on doors, this race is neck and neck. Texas is the biggest battleground state in this country. We can send Kamala Harris to the White House for us, for our community, so that we can send to her desk on day one the Women's Health Protection Act to restore abortion rights as a fundamental human right in this state that cannot be taken away by a corrupt court. We will send to her the John Lewis Voting Rights Act to ban big money in politics and gerrymandering and have automatic voter registration, no matter what Ken Paxton has to say about it. We can make healthcare a human right instead of a privilege, send a Green New Deal to her desk, fight for and win a lasting peace and justice in Gaza and around the world, make sure that there is peace. We stop investing so much in killing people and instead care for people. Pass the Equality Act to ban discrimination against our LGBTQ family and neighbors. And create an economy with affordable housing and decent wages for everybody. How's that sound, San Antonio? How about a pathway to citizenship for our immigrant brothers and sisters? How about that? Let's finally get that done. Don't let anybody tell you our ambitions are too big or our vision too bold. Because we're told all the time that the heroes of our past, MLK or Dolores Huerta, Emma Tenayuca or John Lewis, that they are somehow made of gold, that their fight was different, that they were different than us. But they are dust and clay just like us. They were called to this moment, to their moment just like us. Their legacy passes this responsibility down to us. We're at a fork in the road. They would be looking at us right now and say, Texas, we need you. You are the next version of us. That's here in San Antonio. That's you guys. That's you guys. They pass down to us this incredible responsibility and opportunity. I remind myself of that responsibility every day with these 2 bracelets on my wrist. They were given to me by the family members of 2 of the many children killed in Uvalde. I've told them that I'll keep them on my wrist or on my desk until we win justice for them. Leila Salazar, a bright young student, a track athlete just like me, killed at 10 years old. Amory Jo Garza, an honor roll student, famous for standing up for against bullies at her school. She was shot to death when she was calling 911 to protect her friends. We do this for them. We do this for them. We do this for each other. We do this to ban weapons of war in our schools and on our streets. We do this for the dead, and we do this for those who deserve to live longer. We do this and we organize election after election. Who cares how long it takes, right? Who cares how long it takes? Because we organize to live so people can live free, so that people can live without fear, so that the real Texas can be represented, so that we can have leaders with 1 ounce of the integrity of the everyday person in San Antonio or the everyday child in Uvalde. Am I right? We can do this, y'all. We can do this. And we must. And we're joined here in San Antonio by a true role model who has inspired millions of people across this state and across this country and across the world to organize no matter what. Election after election, in between elections, to care for one another no matter what. He's never given up. He's always spoken up for the right thing. He is tireless and he never quits. Do we ever quit, San Antonio? No! Do we ever quit, San Antonio? No! He has transformed so many people's lives, and now he's passing that responsibility along to us, to have a lifelong commitment to justice and keep our eyes on the prize. He's the one and the only, the United States Senator from Vermont, my friend and mentor, Senator Bernie Sanders.
minutes ago, I did a TV interview in the back room there, and the TV fella asked me, why am I here? And the answer is, the truthful answer is, I love Texas. I really do. You have a great state and great people, and it is wonderful to be back. And I want to thank you all, the people of Texas, for sending Greg Casar to Washington. Greg has not only done a great job in representing his district, the state of Texas, he is out there fighting for working people all over this country. Thank you, Greg. And I want to thank Christina Ramirez and Next Gen for the great work that they do. What Christina understands is that the younger generation in this country, in Texas, in Vermont, and all over this country, is the most progressive young generation in the history of this country. You have led this country in the fight against racism, in the fight against sexism, in the fight against homophobia. And unlike Donald Trump, you know climate change is real. And you want to save this planet for future generations. But what Christina also understands, and kind of why I'm here tonight, is that no matter how strong and progressive the younger generation may be, it don't matter unless you are involved in the political process, unless you vote, and as Greg just said, unless you make a lifelong commitment to the fight for economic, social, and racial justice. You know, generally speaking, presidential elections are about, the important issues facing our country: healthcare, education, the economy, environment, housing, etc., etc. But to a large degree, this particular campaign is about those things, but something very different. To a large degree, this campaign is about Donald Trump's strong anti-democratic tendencies. And what I hope the people of Texas know, and people all over this country understands, we can disagree on this or that issue. That's called democracy. That's a good thing. Stand up and fight for what you believe in. Respect people who have a different point of view. But what we cannot respect is a candidate and a former president who lies all of the time. If his words and statements mean nothing because they are often based on nothing. And you can't run a presidency with that type of mentality. And we cannot maintain our democratic foundations when we have a former president who encouraged an insurrection to overthrow the results of the last election. And by the way, he has still not made it clear that he will abide by the results of this election when he loses. I know Texas is a big football state, right? Well, you got great teams that go out there, they play hard, and sometimes they lose. And when you lose, you don't whine, and you don't cry, and you don't try to change the rules. You accept defeat like a man, like a person, and then try to do better next time. And furthermore, we cannot maintain our democratic foundations when we have a candidate like Trump who keeps heaping praise on terrible dictators like Putin in Russia, Orban in Hungary, and the leader of North Korea, if you can believe it. Now, I want to say something in all seriousness. Democracy, the idea that ordinary people, regular people, can have control and determine the future of their own lives is a very radical concept. Do you know that? It's not like it's been around for thousands of years. It's 250 years old, starting with the American and French revolutions. That's what it is. And before that, people lived in countries where you had kings and queens and oligarchs and huge landowners. They determined everything. And throughout history, people stood up and said, you know what, we got rights. We are human beings. And in this country, they overthrew the British Empire. But democracy is fragile. And all over the world, to tell you the truth right now, for a lot of reasons, I'm going to discuss some of those reasons, democracy is on the defensive. So what this campaign is about, it's not only moving this country forward in a progressive way, it is making certain that the men and women who fought to defend democracy, who died to defend democracy, did not die in vain. But it's not only the broad issue of democracy, as important as that is. Right now, as you know, in South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, and Florida, they are dealing with one of the worst storms they have ever dealt with in their history. Well over 100 people are dead. Businesses have been destroyed. Homes have been destroyed. There will be billions of dollars in damage. Hurricane Helene is one of the worst storms these communities have ever seen. But guess what? That hurricane is not just a once-in-a-million-time occurrence. We are seeing extreme weather patterns all over the world. We are seeing unprecedented forest fires in the West Coast. And I will never forget, in Washington, D.C., thousands of miles away from California and from Canada, we were breathing disgusting air coming from those fires. In the Midwest, they are now experiencing drought, making it hard for farmers to grow the food that we need. In my state of Vermont, we have been hit with more natural disasters in the last few years than we have been hit in 100 years. Homes being destroyed, businesses being destroyed. Right now, as we speak, in Africa, people are starving to death. People are forced off their land because there's no water and there's drought. We are seeing heat waves of an unprecedented level in Europe, in China. There were floods that resulted in millions of people being displaced. Every scientist who has studied this issue understands that climate change is real, that it is an existential threat to our planet, to your generation, and the future of this country. Everyone understands that, except Donald Trump. Trump believes that climate change, this is true, he believes that climate change is a hoax originating in China. Now, we can laugh at that, but I will tell you what that means. It means that if Trump wins this election, the struggle against climate change is over. Because if the United States, the largest economy in the world, is not prepared to transform its energy system away from fossil fuels. China ain't gonna do it. Europe ain't gonna do it. And the situation, as bad as it is now with drought and floods, extreme weather disturbances, year after year becoming warmer and warmer, will only get worse. So if some people out there say, well, you know, I disagree with Kamala Harris on this or that, I'm not going to vote. Well, if that's your attitude and if Trump gets elected, say goodbye to the struggle to save this planet from climate change. I want to say another word. You know, all of those who have studied history here, you know that the struggle for women's rights has been going on literally for hundreds of years. It took until 1920 for women to have the right to vote. 50 years ago, women couldn't do the kind of work they wanted to do. When divorces came, women were not treated well in terms of property rights. But women and their male allies struggled and struggled and struggled so that women in America could become first-class citizens. And people died in that struggle. People put their lives on the line, and some of them died. And over the years, we've made progress, and more progress, and more progress. But then, some years ago, as all of you know, the Supreme Court, in an absolutely horrific decision called Roe v. Wade, overturned the constitutional right of women to control their own bodies. So once again, if you think this campaign is not important, there's not much of a difference, Kamala Harris has spent her life fighting for women's rights. And Donald Trump boasts, is very proud of the Supreme Court justices he appointed who overturned Roe v. Wade. So if you believe in women's rights, the choice is clear. We've got to elect Kamala Harris. Right now in this country, sad to say, but true, we have more income and wealth inequality than we've ever had in the history of America. Do you all know that? You're not going to see that much on TV or in the newspapers for kind of obvious reasons. People on top have never, ever had it so good. What Donald Trump wants to do, one of his main planks, is to continue to give, as he did before, massive tax breaks to billionaires. I don't think that's a good idea. Now, I know, let's be very honest, that there are people in Vermont and Texas, all across this country, who have disagreements with Kamala and the Biden administration. Greg mentioned to you a moment ago the absolutely horrific war that is taking place in Gaza. 40,000 Palestinians are dead, 2/3 of whom are women, children, and the elderly. 90,000 have been wounded. Healthcare system has been destroyed. The infrastructure system has been destroyed. Every university, 12 of them in Gaza, have been bombed. And I have a disagreement with the Biden administration on that issue. And in fact, I have just brought forth a joint resolution to make sure that Israel does not get the arms that it wants. Israel has a right to defend itself. It does not have a right to go to war against the entire Palestinian people. As some of you may know, folks like Donald Trump and Ted Cruz, you've heard of Ted Cruz? Just wanted to make sure, and other Republicans, they refer to progressives like Greg Casar and myself as far left. We are far left. So I wanted this evening to take a moment to tell you what so-called far left is, what that agenda is, and why, in fact, it is an agenda supported by the overwhelming majority of the American people. Let's talk about what's going on in America today. Today, 60% of our people are living paycheck to paycheck. You all know what that is? I grew up in a family that lived paycheck to paycheck. That means you worry how you're going to pay the bills. If the landlord raises your rent, you worry how you're going to be able to meet that payment. Whether you take your kid out of a school, have to go elsewhere, your car breaks down, you can't get to work, you get fired, you get sick, you can't afford to go to the doctor, you get sicker. That's what living paycheck to paycheck is about. In America today, 60% of our people are in that condition. 25% of our elderly people 65 or older, are trying to get by on $15,000 a year or less. Can you imagine that, being old and trying to get by on $15,000 a year? Over 600,000 fellow Americans are homeless. And while all of that is going on, the people on top have never in the history of America had it so good. Today, not only do we have more income and wealth inequality than we have ever had, we have become a nation in which the billionaire class exerts enormous power over the economic and political life of our nation. Here is the bottom line, and you don't hear it discussed. It's not discussed in the Senate, not discussed too much in the House, not discussed on TV. Here's the reality. Never before in American history have so few had so much wealth and so much power. And our job is to say to these oligarchs, guess what? Not only can you not have all of this wealth and power, we're going to do something about it and create a more egalitarian type society. In the economy, what you are seeing is in sector after sector, whether it's agriculture, transportation, media, financial services, smaller and smaller numbers of huge corporations not only controlling what is produced, but also the prices we pay for their goods. And when you know people talk about inflation, understand that many of these large corporations are making record-breaking profits as they jack up the prices that we pay in the grocery store and at the gas pump. But these guys have not only enormous economic power, and here is an issue we just don't talk enough about. They have unbelievable amounts of political power in both political parties. As a result of this terrible Citizens United Supreme Court decision, the geniuses on the Supreme Court decided that billionaires, through super PACs, could spend as much money as they want in elections. So you got these billionaires, for them, 20, 30, 50, $100 million is not a lot of money. And it's a good investment if they can elect friends who will give them more tax breaks and defeat people who are standing up for the working class. To my mind, one of the very most important issues that we have got to deal with in this country is to end this Citizens United decision. Get rid of super PACs and billionaires buying elections and move to public funding of elections. And that means that if some of you want to run for office, maybe it's local office, maybe it's state legislature, maybe it's Congress, maybe whatever it is, you should not have to beg rich people for campaign funds. So, let me also tell you a little bit about the so-called far-left agenda, which, in addition to ending the Citizens United, understands that our goal is to create an economy and a nation that works for all of us, not just wealthy campaign contributors. And I want to impress upon you that we are the wealthiest nation in the history of the world. We should not have people sleeping out on the streets. We should not. But in order to bring about that change, we need millions of people coming together around an agenda that works for all and not just a few. Let me just touch on a few of the items that I think are on that agenda. In my view, and in the view of the vast majority of the American people, health care is a human right, not a privilege. Now, a lot of Americans don't know this. You know, they think when people like me talk about health care as a human right, it's a radical idea. It is not a radical idea. It exists in every other major country on earth. Just last week in Washington, I was talking to a guy from Denmark. And I said, tell me, what happens when you get sick? He said, well, we go to the doctor. How much does it cost? Oh, it doesn't cost anything. Well, what happens when you go to the hospital? Do you have to pay any out-of-pocket expense? Oh, no. You know, you can go there for weeks and months and, you know, that's all. There's no billing. And that is not unusual. I live 50 miles away from the Canadian border. Same thing. Meanwhile, in terms of healthcare, we are spending, this is unbelievable, twice as much per person as they do in Denmark and in Canada, and we got 85 million uninsured or underinsured. Our job is to make clear, and to fight to make clear, that the function of healthcare is to guarantee healthcare to all people as a human right, not to enrich the drug companies and the insurance companies. So we need you in that fight. It is not a radical fight. When you get sick, you should not hesitate to go to a doctor. If you end up in the hospital, I want to hear something that's unbelievable about the insanity of our current healthcare system. 25% of Americans who are undergoing cancer treatment, who have undergone cancer treatment. Cancer is a very difficult disease. You got to struggle to overcome it. 25% of the people end up going bankrupt or losing all of their financial resources. Can you believe that? People are struggling with cancer and then they got to worry about whether they're going to go bankrupt. So we have got to continue that fight, and that's why I've introduced year after year a Medicare for All single-payer program. I'm chairman of a committee that deals with some of these issues, and I will tell you that it is insane that in some cases we pay 10 times more for prescription drugs than people in other countries are paying. Our job should be, we're not going to pay a nickel more than other countries, which means cutting the cost of prescription drugs in this country in half. 1 out of 4 Americans cannot afford the prescription drugs their doctors prescribe. How crazy is that? Let me tell you about another issue that is not getting the kind of discussion it needs. In the richest country in the history of the world, millions of people should not be working for starvation wages. What is the minimum wage here in Texas? How much? Yeah, well, that's the federal minimum wage, and it hasn't been raised in a very, very long time. It really is not a radical idea to say that if a person works 40 hours a week, that person should not be living in poverty. We've got to raise the minimum wage to a living wage, I think at least $17 an hour. In recent years, I hope all of you understand that one of the ways that working people make it into the middle class is through a strong union. And in recent years, we have seen a revitalization of the trade union movement. We've seen workers go on strike and win really good contracts, other people trying to form unions. But one of the problems is that all over this country, when workers come together, they say, hey, we would like a union. You have employers, big corporations, who act illegally in firing workers and subjecting workers to brainwashing efforts, etc. Corporations should not be able to act illegally to deny people the constitutional right to form a union. We've got to pass what's called the PRO Act. We are living in a highly competitive global economy. We do not succeed as a nation unless we have the best educated workforce in the world. It is a no-brainer to say that every person in this country who wants an education, wants to go to college, wants to go to a vocational school to get the skills he or she needs, they should be able to do that tuition free. Now in the last couple of years, some good news is that we have canceled student debt for 5 million Americans. And I thank the president for moving in that direction, but more has got to be done. People should not be punished for decades because of the crime of getting a higher education. Psychologists tell us that the most important years of a human life is what? 0 through 3, exactly. And yet we have a child care system in America which is totally broken. Working families can't afford the high cost, while workers in child care are grossly underpaid. When we talk about education as a human right, we've got to talk about child care for the little kids and the parents as a human right as well. In Vermont, and I expect in Texas, we are having and seeing a massive housing crisis, not just homelessness. It's people being forced to pay 40-50% of their limited incomes in order to rent an apartment. Kamala Harris is exactly right when she says we need to build 3 million more units of low-income and affordable housing. Some people say, well, Bernie, those are nice ideas. How are you going to pay for them? Well, I will tell you exactly how we're going to pay for them. We're going to demand that the wealthiest people and largest corporations in America start finally paying their fair share of taxes. It is an absurd tax system where nurses and truck drivers pay an effective tax rate that is higher than billionaires pay. And then when you have large corporations out there making billions who pay almost nothing in taxes. Now, billionaire class may not like it. The CEOs of these large corporations may not like it, but they are going to start paying their fair share of taxes. So let me just conclude by saying this. I know that there are a lot of folks out there who say, politics is bullshit, forgive my French. I don't want to get involved, I don't like either of them, I'm not going to vote and all that stuff. Please do not fall into that trap. That is exactly what the establishment, the people of the money and the power, want you to believe. If you are not voting, if you are not mobilizing, if you are not educating and organizing, they have even more power. So what our job is, and it's not easy. You know, Greg referenced history. Civil rights movement, not easy. Anti-war movement, not easy. These changes don't come overnight. But we are fighting for the future of this country, for your kids and future generations. We do not have the right to sulk in despair and give up. That is what they want us to do. What we have got to do is go out and get our friends to the polls. We've got to do everything that we can. And by the way, if Kamala Harris wins Texas, and I think she has a chance to win Texas. If she wins Texas, game over. She's the next president of the United States. So what I'm asking of you tonight is to do everything you can in the next 5 weeks. And after we win this election, take a few days off, and then come on back and fight for the agenda that tells the ruling class of this country they cannot have it all. We're going to create a nation that works for all of us. Thank you all very much.